And we're going to get started here at in 1 or 2 minutes. I see it's to let everyone get a chance to get into the webinar and give everyone a last second for get a glass of water, or a cup of coffee, or whatever's hourly appropriate for you, and get your notebooks and everything in order so that you be ready. We have a great panel here with us today, and we're looking forward to having a really good event. So thank you for taking time to spend with us. Get started in 1 or 2 minutes here. All right, everyone. Well, we have about 100 people here with us today, so we're really happy to have everyone. And I see you're introducing yourselves over there in the chat box, so go ahead and feel free to say hello to your fellow attendees. We have people from Portugal, Bangladesh, Turkey, Nigeria, India, really covering many different time zones, many different countries, and I think probably many different professional backgrounds and levels of experience. So we're really happy and excited to have you all here today for the IWRA webinar. So just to welcome everyone to the International Water Resources Association webinar for Source to Sea Management. Today, our panelists include Sarantuya Zandraya, a program specialist at the Division of Water Science Intergovernment Hydrology Program, IHP, UNESCO, Ivan Zavansky, Executive Secretary of the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River in Austria, Ruth Matthews, Senior Manager, Stockholm International Water Institute, Rebecca Welling, Natural Infrastructure Advisor at the IUCN Global Water Program in Switzerland, and Flavia Rocha Lores, leading lawyer at the International and Comparative Law of Milhar Vagondas, Environmental Consultancy in Brazil. And of course, will be moderated by Josh Weinberg, a program specialist in the Water Resource Department of Stockholm International Water Institute. We appreciate everyone for joining us here today. As you know, this is a webinar hosted by the International Water Resources Association. The IWRA is an international network of researchers and practitioners who work on a multidisciplinary range of water resource issues. It is a nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization. The IWRA provides a global knowledge-based forum for bridging disciplines and geographies by connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, institutes, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. So we're really happy to have you here. So thank you for tuning in today. We have such a great panel, and it's really an interesting group of practitioners and researchers, people who have been active in the field for really quite a many years. Just so you know, I think you probably have a bit of background, but this is a webinar about the source to sea water management, and we're going to examine different applications of this concept and how it will be used to improve environmental health of both freshwater, land, and then coastal and marine ecosystems. And it'll be drawing on presentations with research on Europe, Africa, and Asia. So many different contexts, many different case studies. As well as some presentations which will cover broader holistic questions. So, and this is drawn from a special issue of the IWRA's flagship journal, Water International, which is published several times a year. And throughout that, we have both regular issues and we have special issues, and the special issues focus on specific topics. And this is a topic of source to sea management, one that we've been working on for quite a number of years, if I remember correctly. And we're really happy to see it come together. So if this webinar leaves you interested and want you to know more, please, you can go check it out from our great publishers at Taylor & Francis and see the whole special issue of which covers many articles and some that weren't even able to cover here today at the webinar. So the special issue came together in collaboration with members of the Action Platform for Source to Sea Management, and that includes the Stockholm National Water Institute, UNESCO Intergovernmental Hydrology Program, Examine University, and the Global Water Institute at the University of New South Wales. So just to briefly give you an introduction to today's webinar, I know a lot of you have already come to some of our webinars before, but for those of you who haven't, or if you need a refresher, we're going to have each of the presentations in order. So we're going to do all of them at the beginning, and then at the end, we're going to have time for your questions from the audience. So if you come up with a question, go ahead and feel free to pose it there in the Q&A box, and we will try to get a chance to ask it to our audience and our panelists at the end of the presentations. Now, if it's a small question, feel free to follow up with our panelists directly. If you see the presentation and you say the fifth slide makes me think about this, or I have a question about your methodology or something like that, feel free to follow up. They're all really extremely friendly people. So I assure you that they'll be happy to talk about their research and work with you. I would think. So go ahead and send that in, and we'll have all those questions at the end. So we always like to record the webinar, and we'll have the presentations, PDFs of presentations, on our website, www.iwra.org, in a couple days after the end of the webinar. So give us a couple days, we'll have it up there. So with that, I think the introduction is taken care of, and I'd like to turn our floor over to my esteemed moderator, Josh Weinberg. Josh, you're muted there. Still muted.
Yes, hello everybody. Sorry for the delay there. So I was working to share my screen. My name is Josh Weinberg. I'm a program manager at the Stockholm International Water Institute. Scott, I'm sorry, I hear an echo. I hope it's not going for everybody else.
No, you're fine. You're good.
Okay, great. So as I said, I've been working for over 15 years at SIWI and with water and its many linkages to sustainable development challenges. One of those is the source to sea management, where I've been working from more or less the beginning of when the term was coined by Professor Jan Lundqvist back in 2007, when we were working with partners actually at Xiamen, in the city of Xiamen, who hosted the World Ocean Week in Xiamen. And as a group of freshwater specialists, we listened to the presentations that were made and talking to our colleagues there, and we realized that many of the challenges they were talking about with pollution and issues affecting the coastal waters and the ocean actually had their origin on land-based issues and were flowing through the fresh waters and the river systems. So we understood that the challenges that they were highlighting, but the audience of the conversation was entirely people working in the coastal areas. So we began this discussion of how can we work more with integrating these issues from the source of the challenge down to the sea and connect these communities better. And I'm delighted to host this webinar with you today, and that you're taking the time to join us. I'd also like to thank Scott and IWRA for hosting the event and for publishing this latest special issue on source to sea management. Additional thank yous to Caleb Clench, who we began this discussion with a couple years ago at IWRA, as you mentioned, as one of the groups within the Action Platform on source to sea management to produce an issue on source to sea, as well as Professor James Ninkum for his help during that process. As Scott mentioned, this edition of Water International is the first scientific journal to dedicate an entire issue on the topic of source to sea management, and was done together with several members of the Action Platform for Source to Sea Management. Those partners include Xiamen University, the University of South Wales, Unesco Ihp, and IWRA, and several other members who contributed as authors. I'd also like to thank the other editors of the issue, Professor Fang Qinhua, Professor Greg Leslie, Dr. Sarantuya Zandraya, and James Nickham. Now, the Action Platform for Source to Sea Management is a multi-stakeholder initiative that's working towards a world in which land, freshwater, coastal, and marine resources are managed holistically. And this is done by adopting and implementing the source to sea approach at different levels. The Action Platform began in 2014 as an official platform with 7 members, and today has grown to over 30 members. So what is the source to sea approach? The source to sea approach aims to improve understanding and work on the linkages between freshwater, land, coastal, and marine systems, and support efforts towards the effective governance of these systems. It focuses on looking at 6 different flows that go through the systems, connecting land, freshwater, estuaries, deltas to the coastlines, the sea shelf, and into the open sea. And it divides us in a framework where you look at water flows, flows of biota like fish, sediment, pollutants, materials, and ecosystem services. And in this special issue, we look at many different aspects of how to implement source to sea in practice and what we've learned from examinations in these different areas. It looks at source to sea issues ranging from pharmaceutical, sediment, plastic, and nutrient pollution. It also looks at governance questions and takes perspectives from cases in different regions around the world. And while it's just a first step, I think it's an important milestone to develop the science behind the very many areas of practice that the management of source to sea systems require. And as Chris mentioned, we're really happy to be joined by 5 excellent speakers today. Each will speak for about 10 minutes, so we hope to have enough time for interactive conversation with you all. We'll hear from Ruth Matthews from SIWI, who will be speaking on behalf of Dr. Mulugeta Belete from Hawassa University, who unfortunately could not join us, but she'll share work that she was co-author with and did with Dr. Belete on how the source to sea approach can be adapted to work as a source to lake solution for sedimentation challenges seen in Lake Hawassa, Ethiopia. We will also hear from other speakers on the research on ways that source to sea governance approaches can be improved or expanded. Rebecca Welling will present on building governance networks across the source to sea continuum. Flavia Rocha Lores, an international water law expert, will give some insights on ways in which source to sea management can be promoted within transboundary water and seas from an international water law perspective. We'll also hear about how source to sea approach can be tackled to deal with very difficult emerging pollutants like pharmaceuticals in the Baltic Sea, as well as some successful examples in the Danube and Black Sea region, where the nutrient pollution has actually been improved, from a presentation from the executive director of the ICPDR, Ivan Zavadsky. So with all these presentations, we're really covering a lot of new ground on the field. And with the hopes that we can have a good discussion, at least 30 to 40 minutes, and hear your ideas, reflections, and questions, I would like to get right to the speakers. And again, as Chris mentioned, we welcome you to write your questions directly for our panelists in the chat in the field, and we will collect those and give them to the speakers. So I would like to invite our first speaker to present, Dr. Sarantuya Zandraya from Unesco IHP. You're welcome to take the floor for your presentation.
Good morning, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to participate in this webinar. First of all, I would like to thank the International Water Resources Association and the Stockholm International Water Institute and all the partners of the Source to Sea platform for having worked collaboratively to publish a special issue on this topic of great concern for the global freshwater and ocean community. And I also hope that this issue will inspire more work, studies, and action policies on this topic. So I would like to present the UNESCO article published in the special issue, which demonstrates the water pollution, not only in the context of freshwater resources management, but also how our activities impact oceans, seas, all the way from freshwater to sea and marine ecosystems. And this article also demonstrates how science and scientific information is essential for the development of relevant policies and action, as is the case the new policies developed by the Helcom Convention for the protection of the Baltic Sea marine environment. So I'm presenting this paper, which has been collaboratively published by UNESCO and the Helcom Convention. So emerging pollutants is a new global issue, and it is a new issue, but it is important for the sustainable development worldwide has been coined in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as several sustainable development goals highlight the importance of addressing emerging pollutants, which include pharmaceuticals, chemicals, pesticides, household chemicals, etc. So, and the importance of reducing emerging pollutants input to the environment, terrestrial and aquatic environment, actually requires an approach, a holistic approach from source to sea. And this need also has been highlighted in several sustainable development goals, including the goal 12 on responsible consumption and production, and of course how the SDG 6 on clean water, which includes a specific target on reduction of water pollution, can contribute to the achievement of other goals, such as the goal 15 on ecosystems and land, goal 14 on healthy oceans, and goal 3 on good health and human well-being. So the implementation of sustainable development goals actually requires the source to sea approach to address pollutants both in freshwater environments and in oceans. So this article actually presents the results of the first of its kind assessment of pharmaceuticals in both freshwater and marine environments in the Baltic Sea region, and the assessment has started in 2015 with an official survey to Helcom member countries, requesting to provide data on pharmaceuticals use, sales, consumption, as well as their detection in wastewater, sludge, rivers, seawater, and marine biota. Because this was important to understand the extent and magnitude of this problem and how this problem can actually impact both freshwater and marine ecosystems, and at the end also our food security. So to this assessment, 7 countries of the Baltic Sea region have provided official data through national reporting. So the results of this assessment has actually highlighted that pharmaceuticals are consumed in large quantities in this region, and the data actually shows that on average, one person consumes about 80 grams of different pharmaceuticals, and of which about 30, even up to 90% are disposed to the freshwater aquatic environment with wastewater, because our traditional conventional wastewater treatment plants are not effective in removing these new pollutants from wastewater. This data actually demonstrated that out of 118 different pharmaceuticals monitored in wastewater influence and effluents, only 9 of them were removed with an efficiency over 95%, while more than 50 were removed with an efficiency less than 50%. This shows that all the pharmaceutical residues which are found in wastewater can end up in freshwater environments. So these are just a list of the top 20 detected pharmaceuticals, and you can see that these pharmaceuticals represent different groups, and we can find all sorts of pharmaceuticals in freshwater environments because they are disposed with wastewater, both even treated and untreated, even if they are treated with the secondary level of treatment. So the data provided to this assessment also has shown that a large variety of different pharmaceuticals are found in the rivers. Out of 111 pharmaceuticals monitored, 56 were detected. It means that the more we monitor or measure pharmaceuticals in freshwater environments, the more the more pharmaceuticals or pollutants we will detect them, or we will find them in river water. And of course, the concentrations of these pollutants are in general in micrograms per liter, but because we don't know what are the potential human health impacts of these pollutants, as well as their impacts on aquatic ecosystems and their fate and behavior in the aquatic environment, it is really important to study whether these pollutants pose health risk even at this concentration level. The most important finding of this assessment was that all the pharmaceuticals which were detected in wastewater, in river water, were found in the marine environment, in marine water, sediment, and biota. Out of 167 different pharmaceuticals monitored in marine water, sediment, and biota, 74 were detected. This shows that the pollution is transported through rivers all the way to seas and oceans. And the most concerning part of this assessment is that the pharmaceuticals were also detected in marine biota, in particular in invertebrates and also in fish of lower and higher trophic levels in the aquatic food web. And you can see that over 13 to 15 different pharmaceuticals were found in fish, while up to 27 different pharmaceuticals were found in the blue mussels. So this study was really important to provide the scientific basis for the development of policies and action to reduce pharmaceutical pollution into the Baltic Sea region. So the Health Ministerial Declaration in 2018 has welcomed this study as the basis for the development of measures to prevent pharmaceuticals from reaching the Baltic Sea. And also on the basis of this assessment, the Health Commission has adopted a pre-core test indicator, diclofenac, which is a pharmaceutical of concern because it is found in higher concentrations and it is the least removed in wastewater treatment plants. So this is actually the first official monitoring effort at the global level to monitor this new type of pollutant in both freshwater and marine environments. Of course, on the basis of this study, another indicator, hormones, was proposed, but because of the insufficient data, this indicator was not adopted. So this also highlights the need for methodological guidance to monitor new and emerging pollutants in both freshwater and marine environments. The HELCOM Convention even went further in terms of the follow-up activity, and the HELCOM Convention has recognized that emerging pollutants represent a significant part of the human-induced environmental pressures on the Baltic Sea environment, and actually pharmaceuticals were identified one of the 4 major groups of the contaminants in the Baltic Sea environment. And to tackle this issue, the Baltic Sea Convention has developed an action called macropollutants in effluents of wastewater treatment plants. So it means that to protect the marine environment, the action should be taken upstream in the freshwater and wastewater management. So this actually shows the need for source to sea approach to reduce pollution in both freshwater and marine environments, and also to protect both freshwater and marine environments. So the main conclusions of this study was that emerging pollutants are not fully removed in wastewater treatment plants. So most of the emerging pollutants enter rivers and streams, and they are transported to seas and oceans as their ultimate environmental sinks. And of course, scientific information on the presence, fate, and behavior of emerging pollutants in freshwater systems and oceans is really important for the development of policies and action throughout the source to sea continuum. And then also to address this issue, it is really important to tackle the pollutants throughout their life cycle, from sustainable consumption and production to efficient water quality and wastewater management, and measures to monitor and protect marine environment from land-based activities. So of course, this is a very brief presentation just to show the highlights of this study, and I would invite you to read the article in this special issue, and then also to go to the UNESCO report, which also has more data on this study. So thank you so much. With this, I end my presentation.
Thank you very much, Sarantuya, for a very interesting presentation. I'd like to welcome our next speaker. That is Mr. Ivan Zavadsky, the Executive Director for the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River, for your presentation on the successful case study done in the Danube River and the Black Sea for reducing nutrient pollution. The floor is yours.
Good morning, good afternoon. Do you see my screen?
Yes, but if you could just make it full screen there.
I will, but I'm not sure how to do it. Let me do. I have to go to slideshow. Don't worry.
Yes.
Yeah. Here we go. Right.
Perfect.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you for inviting me to this webinar to present the work of my colleague Adam Kovac and myself, which is in more detail described in the article in International Waters. Just about myself, before I start working for International Commission for Protection of the Danube River Basin here, I also had the opportunity to run a Black Sea environment protection project in Istanbul, and also to support this initiative Source to Sea from the Secretary of GEF. So I'm very pleased that IWRA is taking this initiative and moving forward the knowledge side of this. So, yeah, so just very quickly, the Danube River Basin is the most international river basin in the world, shared by 19 countries, home for more than 80 million people, and covering 800,000 square kilometers of the Europe. Important feature of our work, except for this challenge of too many countries sharing, that it's extremely inhomogeneous, with high variability of natural factors, hydrology, climate, topography, and socioeconomic conditions, economic development, political situation, land management, and cultural. But what is important, what was the first step towards the better management here, that in 1994, 11 Danube countries signed a convention to protect the Danube River Basin, and looking at how to manage and use the water resources sustainably and equitably. But this also involves conservation of aquatic ecosystems, but also implementation of preventive measures to reduce pollution. And I will speak later about nutrient pollution. Moreover, this convention is the only freshwater international law based on instrument stipulating the commitment of contracting parties to protect the receiving water body, in our case, the Black Sea, from the pollution. And to make our, let's say, cooperation even more institutionally sustainable, in 2001, this commission signed a memorandum of understanding with the International Commission of Protection of the Black Sea, that which outlines that the long-term goal in the wider Black Sea basin is to make measures to reduce the loads of nutrients and hazardous substances discharged to such levels necessary to permit Black Sea ecosystem to recover to conditions similar to those observed in 1960. So very quickly, nutrient pollution has been identified by ICPDR as one of the significant water management issues in the basin. The nutrient loads transported by the Danube to the Black Sea reached their peak around late 80s, early 90s, causing massive hypoxia that was accompanied with a severe algae growth affecting the ecosystem of the northwestern shelf of the Black Sea. However, since then, river loads entering the Black Sea have been significantly dropped, and the situation in the northwestern Black Sea shallow waters had improved considerably due to reduced nutrients and due to reduced eutrophication. Of course, to get to this data, we need to do some monitoring. And long-term data on observed river flow, nutrient concentration, and calculated river loads for the Danube are available in the water quality in the Transnational Monitoring Network maintained by ICPDR, which are also linking the pollution loads of the Danube with the status of the Black Sea. And each year, the ICPDR provides the Commission, the Black Sea Commission, with pollution loads figures at the monitoring station Reni, which is 132 kilometers away from the mouth, which is considered as a gate to the Black Sea. Of course, if you look at the data in front of you on dissolved inorganic nitrogen and total phosphorus, the historical evolution of the nutrient loads transported to the Black Sea showed a clear increasing tendency from early 60s, reaching peak in late 80s. But this was accompanied with severe algae growth and eutrophication. But since then, you see, the loads have been decreasing in response to the measures implemented in the basin, but also to the decline in intensity of agriculture resulted in closure of large animal farms and lower fertilizer applications. So the recent long-term fluxes transported to Danube to the Black Sea are 350,000 tons per year of dissolved inorganic nitrogen and 24,000 tons per year in total phosphorus. On one hand, these fluxes are much lower than those in late 80s, as you see on the screen, indicating substantial load reduction, 25% for both nutrients. But on the other hand, they are still considerably higher than those of early 60s. And these target lines are 250,000. You see the yellow target line, the 250 tons of dissolved inorganic nitrogen and 20,000 tons for phosphorus. Of course, to understand the way how the nutrients are getting first to the surface water and groundwater of the basin, and later on by the main river stem into the sea. We have to look at what are the pathways, what are the sources, and understanding of these things of nutrient emissions are linking catchment activities to in-stream nutrient fluxes are essential to design measures for different sectors and evaluate their effectiveness. To assess the point and diffuse nutrient emissions from all sources, the Moneris model is regularly applied for entire basin. It is an empirical catchment scale, lump parameter, and long-term average water quality model calculating nitrogen and phosphorus. If we look at the pathways and source of portion on this slide, so this is first one on total nitrogen, you see that dominate by actually diffuse sources dominate by nitrogen, by total nitrogen, and also for phosphorus. When we come to next slide, when we come to total phosphorus, you see again that the sources is really the key is coming from urban water and agriculture. If you compare the emissions figures to those calculated for first river-based management plan, because ICPDR is also developing the river-based management plan under the Water Framework Directive for the entire basin, you will see a remarkable emissions decrease. And point sources discharges by 32% for total nitrogen, 45% for total phosphorus. So if you look at the result of the Moneris, then you see this is a spatial distribution, a long-term average area space with total nitrogen emissions from point and diffuse sources into surface waters and subcatchment scale in kilogram per hectares. The same results provides Moneris for total phosphorus. Now coming to, I would say, to the good part of our success story. As I said, the Western Black Sea has a long history associated with eutrophication influence. And since the early 70s, the observed eutrophication effects include harmful algae growth, reduction of water transparency, oxygen level, decline in density of macroalgae, mass mortality of fish, and so on and so forth. So hypoxia reached peak in 1990 when approximately 40,000 square kilometers of the northwestern shelf bed was considered dead. The formerly expansive hypoxic zone covering northwestern shelf due to the reduction of the emissions has been virtually eliminated. Nowadays, you see only accidental hypoxia events in the late summer, early fall, but not such a massive hypoxia as we have in the past. And of course, the current eutrophication status is really described by gradual chlorophyll A concentration decrease in the entire northwestern Black Sea shelf. And this was observed by the Joint Black Sea Survey by the MBLAS project in 2017. And if you look at the right upper corner, an ecological sentinel has also confirmed the positive development. The mollusk species angel wings that is sensitive to pollution has reappeared after many years of absence. To conclude, the story or the whole development in this interaction between the Danube River Basin and Northwestern Shelf, that, as I said, nutrient pollution is one of the significant issues still, and we haven't reached the level of load which is necessary to reach the condition 1960. Even that in past it was very high, the Northwestern Shelf ecosystem was gradually able to recover in response to the decline of nutrient loads, which are measured. But the nutrient pressures within the basin and the Black Sea Northwestern Shelf still exist and remains higher than the environmental objectives. So we must remain vigilant and the pressures may become stronger again. Implementation of measures should therefore continue, despite the fact that so many measures in agriculture sector, industrial wastewater pollution, urban wastewater pollution has been done. The wastewater sector and agriculture are still the biggest challenges for potential increase of nutrient pollutions. And this is related with the also governance and management problems, because the financing, operation, and technological aspects of wastewater infrastructure is key to the success. And as ICPDI is working on it, we develop a guidance document on sustainable agriculture. There is need to decouple nutrient pollution from agriculture development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for a very interesting story from the Danube River. Now we've heard two presentations with their very different pollutant types. We have heard a story of hopefully new successes, but sort of current failures of managing pharmaceutical pollution coming from wastewater into our seas in the Baltic. And then we've heard a story of success in reducing nutrient pollution, very old problem, but still something requiring a lot of work. Now we're going to hear a presentation from Ruth Matthews from Stockholm International Water Institute, speaking on behalf of Dr. Mulugeta Dadi-Balite, who was the lead author on the paper. Ruth also worked on looking at a third type of pollution challenge with sediment, and also in a very different setting. We will now leave the rivers and lakes, the rivers and seas of Europe, and go into a lake environment in Ethiopia. Ruth, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you. And my apologies, while I've been very involved in this project and the study, I did not prepare this presentation. So if I get lost, I apologize, but hopefully I will remember enough of what Mulugeta has in mind to be able to take you through this. So
before you get too started, could you make the slide fill you're in presenter mode where we see the next slide, and we see the next slide, and we see all the
I don't know how to get out of that.
Could you get one slide to go closer? Can you go up there to display settings? You see right there in the center. I think you probably have two monitors. There you go. Try that there. Yeah.
Okay, now I see nothing.
Yeah, me either. I like it better the first way.
Yeah.
Good, there we go. Perfect. Beautiful.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. It seems like every time I go in, it's something a little different that doesn't go quite right. So this article is based on a project that SIWI has been implementing in two locations, the Lake Hawassa subbasin in the Ethiopian Rift Valley, and in a basin in central Vietnam. This article is specifically about the work in Ethiopia. And what we were doing is basically piloting this source-to-sea approach to management that has been developed by SIWI and the source-to-sea platform, and has been documented in the practitioner's guide. I put a link for that in the chat in case you're interested in looking at that. And so the reason why we went to the Lake Hawassa subbasin to pilot this is because while there have been a variety of approaches to natural resources management, there hasn't been one that has really so clearly drawn the link between the land, the waters, kind of rivers area, the coastal areas, and out into the marine systems. And so bringing the source-to-sea approach to problems that have been unable to be resolved by approaches that take more a siloed approach to natural resources management is something that we're hoping to see more solutions arise from doing this. And many of you may know that Ethiopia has no marine coastal area. It is a landlocked country, and so you might be wondering how we do a source to sea approach there. What we did was we transformed it into the source to lake approach, because Lake Hawassa is an endorheic lake, meaning that it has a closed basin, that everything in the basin flows into the lake, as it does with a sea or an ocean. And so we were able to use the same kind of methodology and philosophy to be able to address the issues in the Lake Hawassa subbasin. And we focused on the first 3 steps of the source to sea approach, looking at the biophysical system, looking at the social system, meaning the stakeholders, and then doing a governance analysis. And these 3 steps really bring the knowledge base together for us to be able to create a theory of change that can then be used to identify actions that can be undertaken to address the issues in the basin. And so this is a snapshot of the where it is in Ethiopia, the Lake Hawassa subbasin. And you can also see the topography here. And this is really important because one of the key issues that we were looking at is the sediment issue. And what has been happening is that there has been a lot of agriculture and deforestation combined in the upland areas, allowing sediment erosion to happen. For this study, we used a variety of research methods, including collecting primary data and field visits and consulting with stakeholders. And what you see in the basin is that there are several different transport pathways for sediment to move from the upland areas into the lake. And I think this picture of the lake can really give you an idea that as this sediment is flowing into the lake, there's no place for it to move towards. And so it is in fact leading to filling in of the lake. And these pathways have different sources of why the sediment is happening. In some cases, it's like I said, with the deforestation, the agricultural cultivation. In some cases, it's sand and gravel mining. And we also looked a bit at the movement of solid waste, particularly plastics, into the lake along these different continuums. And so looking at the sediment, it's really an extensive problem in that there are active gullies of a total of almost 700 kilometers in length. And this is quite a small basin. And you can imagine with this much sediment being transported from the upland areas into the lake, that you're really having a serious impact on Lake Hawassa. And you know, just to give you a little insight, Lake Hawassa is in a really beautiful part of Ethiopia. It has a natural fishery. There are hippos that live in the lake. So it is a tourist area. It is an area that supports a lot of the economic activity in the Hawassa city area and the rural areas. So the loss of the lake, it has a really critical impact to the area. So then moving from the more biophysical perspective of looking at all of the sediment and the plastic coming into the lake, we then looked at the stakeholders to understand who was being impacted by the changes in the lake. So the farmers and the fishermen and the hotel owners and the different types of communities that depend on the lake. Who are the stakeholders that are contributing in terms of their activities to the issues that we're facing at the lake? So here you can see that a lot of the deforestation is happening to create firewood for using at the household level. We looked at the enabling stakeholders. So these are the different government public sector actors who have different authorities and mandates related to the activities that are contributing to the sediment erosion, contributing to the poor solid waste management, and all of that then coming to the impacts of the lake. So when we looked at the governance system, and in addition to the different laws and policies and regulations that are important in terms of regulating the types of land uses that are happening, regulating how waste is being managed, what really jumps out is that there is a rural land use policy that tries to limit activities such as agricultural cultivation in higher steep slopes. And unfortunately, this is not being enforced. And so there's quite a large area that is being cultivated in steep slope areas. And this is what's really driving a lot of the sediment erosion. And so we worked with these elements of the understanding what's creating the problems in terms of the sediment and what is the scope of the problem, who is involved in terms of the different stakeholders being impacted or doing the activities that are contributing to the issues, who are the governance stakeholders that we need to engage, and use this to start identifying how could we move from the situation as it is now to a more a more hopeful future for Lake Hawassa by reducing that sediment erosion and being able to provide better solid waste management services so that plastic and other solid waste is not getting into the lake and along the coastline of it. And what really came through here is that a lot of the activities are being driven by economic need. And so how can those economic needs be addressed in a way and be met in a way that doesn't create that erosion? And how do we actually recover those eroded areas so that they become arable land again? So the source to sea approach really widened the perspective for the stakeholders to see the connection between what was happening far upland, upstream of Lake Hawassa, and create those links between the stakeholders that were more in the upland areas and using the land in the upland areas in a way that met their economic needs, but were then having an impact to those dependent on the lake itself for their economic needs. And so it really has built a connection from the source to the sea, to the lake in this case, and that has enabled more opportunity for cooperative and collective solutions to be identified. And so this kind of approach for environmental planning, for looking at governance, for engaging communities, for planning and design of intervention strategies, has really been demonstrated in the Lake Hawassa subbasin as supporting the stakeholders in this solution identification and helping them to be empowered to address the issue and find the ways that they can work together to solve the challenges that they've been facing. And this project was happening simultaneous to the development of the whole Rift Valley Lakes Basin development plan. And so the work that was done in the pilot from the source to sea perspective has supported the development of this basin development plan. And it's just really important to be able to anchor this work and this approach in the basin development plan, because then it has a life that continues far beyond the contribution that seaweed can make. It really resides in the locality with the local stakeholders and the public sector to implement the actions that will preserve the lake for hopefully generations to come. So I think that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth, so much for stepping in and delivering this presentation on very short notice. We had promised you that you would be able to just participate and listen to this seminar today, but we needed you to jump in and save us again. So thank you very much. For many of you, you may know that Ruth is the head of the Secretariat of the Action Platform for Source to Sea Management. She's also the author of the Practitioner's Guide for Source to Sea Management. And this presentation showed us a Source to Sea project that went through the steps using the Practitioner's Guide and the traditional approach to Source to Sea Management. Also showed that it could be adapted even without a sea, that it can work in a lake context, and that it can be integrated into existing management practices, working with the basin development plan in the end and having an input into that. So I think it shows the flexibility and the practicality that can be found in the source to sea approach, and it was very interesting. So thank you, Ruth, for that presentation. We've now looked at 3 different case studies of where source to sea has been applied. And now we're going to maybe broaden the scope a little bit and look at the source to sea approach and how it can expand and integrate with other governance practices. First, we have a presentation from Rebecca Welling, who's works at the IUCN. She's an expert on many topics, from nature-based solutions to water management to natural capital to water, energy, food nexus, and on and on. And she will present on building governance networks with the source to sea approach. So Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Josh. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, great. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can everyone see my presentation?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you very much. And it's a real pleasure to be invited to present this paper. Thank you so much to IWRA for giving the Source to Sea discussion a platform. I'd like to present this on behalf, as it's a collaborative piece, on behalf of my colleagues as well. It's really nice to see it come to fruition. It was a sort of blood, sweat, and tears piece of work through the first lockdown of COVID last year. So it's nice to kind of be on the other side and be able to present the results of it. But certainly the thinking and the content in terms of learning and knowledge from this paper really stems back quite a few years in IUCN's global water program's approach to implementing integrated water resources management, basin management, particularly from an ecosystems approach, very much concentrating on catchment management. So this paper is very much a sort of review piece that consolidates this learning, looks to be able to place what we have learned through our projects and our programs over the years, which we actually started calling ridge to reef. I think there's different terminologies out there, and so it's nice to see all of this come together and more focus and emphasis on this source to sea approach. You know, a key part of our work is very much understanding management solutions for water at scale. Water is managed in a system, and so for the way that we work, especially on our transboundary basins, as we can see from examples previously on the Danube, you know, it's really critical to understand this upstream downstream dynamic. So in terms of what we looked at in the paper, we tried to address the source to sea governance challenge, which has actually been really nicely laid out in these different case studies that we've heard, in terms of limited data knowledge, for example, which has been now responding to and building through the different studies and practices about pollution issues, sedimentation, erosion. There's also this issue around a limited number of tools for practitioners to really get a handle on what the source to sea approach looks like. But again, this is great. There's a movement in this space, as we've just heard from Ruth Matthews, and the source to sea action platform have now a practitioner's guide to be able to move this source to sea approach forward. So these challenges are slowly being met, but they are no doubt still present in many basins around the world. We also have the issue of capacity gaps, and this can be in the form of financial resources, human resources, knowledge, and the transfer and exchange of knowledge between institutions that have different mandates and different focuses. And then, as we can see, this sort of more fragmented governance systems, Ruth highlighted the issues around the range of policies and laws and institutions. And we can see that when you look at the source to sea continuum, you have a range of different governance systems that link freshwater, coastal, marine, land, etc., and different sectors, as we've heard from the different presentations. So it's a complex system. And as things have developed and as basin trajectories get laid out, it is important for us to be able to respond to these often fragmented systems. And finally, as we've also seen this as linked to these fragmented governance systems, you have these disconnected systems with upstream, downstream issues, often developments in certain parts of a river basin that are not taking into account, for example, developments in upstream that don't take into account the impacts of downstream. We see this all too commonly with the development of hydropower, for example, and irrigation. So what the paper and what the learning from IUCN and colleagues internally, and I'd like to also make a point to say that, you know, the colleagues that worked on this paper are also from our marine program. So we've tried to really embody the source to sea approach as well in the thinking and development of the paper itself. We've put forward this understanding of governance networks and have focused on 3 key areas of governance: benefit sharing, multi-stakeholder platforms, and improved agency coordination as sort of areas of governance that can support and enhance a successful source to sea approach. And most importantly, these governance networks embrace the complexity of source to sea systems. As we've heard from the case studies, for example, in the Danube, having a river that covers 19 countries is extremely complex, with all the different policies and laws at the national level, and then trying to bring that all together at the transboundary level. So many different cultural and social aspects to how you manage a river basin and a complex system from source to sea. The governance networks also, the idea is that they help to identify pragmatic solutions for integrated and equitable management. So really something that works on the ground and that's tried and tested and sort of learned through doing. And the idea is that enhancing and harnessing these three areas of governance can therefore enhance connectivity, collaboration, and communication across scales, but also across sectors, landscapes and people, for both development and environmental benefits and gains within the basin. What the paper does is it deep dives into the three governance areas that I've just outlined. So the benefit sharing, multi-stakeholder platforms, and improved agency coordination. And I don't have time here to go into too much detail, but I think it's important just to give a quick overview, and then I can wrap up with a few key messages that come out. And we try and draw on examples that we've seen through our work, but then also we actually draw on the example of the ICPDR and the Danube and the Black Sea Commission collaboration. So it's great to have Ivan be able to present this prior to my presentation on that. But in terms of, if we just look first on the benefit sharing process, you can see it as a governance tool to support and promote this source to sea understanding, because what it does is it opens up a dialogue, talk about the range of benefits that stakeholders can receive from a river basin. So not focusing just on water allocation in terms of quantity, but understanding the range of benefits, social, cultural, economic, financial, peace and stability, cooperation, that we can obtain from a river basin, and then understanding in turn the impacts of development interventions in any given system. What are going to be the upstream, downstream impacts of these different development trajectories? So it reinforces the system-wide planning perspective, which very much, of course, enhances and supports this improved coordination that the source to sea approach calls for. And it also provides a greater scope for optimizing resource use, understanding what are the benefits and how they can be distributed amongst different stakeholders at scale. And the example that we highlight in the paper is that of the Meghna Basin between India and Bangladesh, where IUCN has been working and engaging in a series of workshops to do this shared visioning amongst a range of stakeholders within the source to sea landscape, which has enabled a building of capacity, but also a greater understanding and knowledge around these upstream, downstream dynamics, encouraging reconnectivity, not only through dialogue, but then hopefully through practice. We also looked at the multi-stakeholder platforms. Multi-stakeholder platforms, of course, are a very well-known network, and there's lots of papers that have been written on them, of course, but certainly for the source to sea approach, they provide an extremely beneficial area of governance to promote, allowing a network to be built across scales, linking communities with other players and different hierarchies and scales of management within the source to sea landscape. They can be considered a bit messy, and they are often informal in practice, but they can certainly harness the complexities of the source to sea system. And as we see more of these conversations moving forward, we will need to engage further with a range, a diversity of stakeholders. And so they offer that possibility. One of the examples that we pulled out in our paper was from South Africa and the Catchment Management Forum, this non-statutory body that has been set up to represent stakeholders in decision-making processes around catchment management, and it's been applied in the catchment so far, and it's been quite successful as the research demonstrates, and it looks at the benefits therefore of linking these broad range of stakeholders and what that can bring to the source to sea approach and basin development. And then finally, the other area of governance that we focused on was this understanding of improved agency coordination along the source to sea continuum. And critically, we very much called for the need to not create a new super institution to try and engage and solve these source to sea issues, but it's about catalyzing certain key interactions and engagements and asymmetries between existing institutions and existing policies and actors. And I think, what we've heard from Ivan earlier is a great example of how this works in practice with the collaboration between the Black Sea Commission and the International Commission for the Protection of the Danube River, the ICPDR. And so, it's something that we can see that works in practice, and it's something that can enhance this understanding of governance networks across the source to sea continuum. So in terms of the general key messages from the paper, what we try and highlight is that, fundamental to fostering sustainable development from source to sea, it is good governance. Good governance underpins interventions within basins. It also provides the enabling environment and a strong framework to catalyze innovation, collaboration, communication, and also integration at scale and across sectors. And also by using these areas and focusing on these three areas of governance, these benefit sharing process, these multi-stakeholder platforms, and improving agency coordination allows us to strengthen these governance networks that can improve coordination and harness the source to sea approach. And certainly it's important to highlight that adopting new approaches can be challenging for institutions, asking them to step outside their mandate, understand dynamics that is not immediately within their institutional responsibilities. Certainly when there are intersectoral challenges, this can be a challenge, but certainly harnessing integrated systems thinking across scales and stakeholder groups is something that we really have seen and feel that can lead to more collaborative and connected source to sea basin development. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Rebecca. And I think, your presentation has shown us that there's a lot more we can learn and improve upon about pushing the source to sea approach while connecting with also fairly tried and true good governance approaches at basin level or other management techniques. So we push the systems thinking and integrated thinking across different scales, but we can also connect new ways of doing things with the ways that we already know that work and people are familiar with, so that it is easier for uptake. And I think that's a valuable contribution and something we can figure out. I think the source to sea approach does a lot of these things traditionally with setting up like multi-stakeholder platforms and networks. And the question is, how do we use the best techniques that we know, or the ones that exist and are known in the local context, to keep on doing that in the future, so it's more easy for it to be applied. Okay, we are running on time, but now we're here with our final speaker. I'd like to welcome Ms. Flavia Rocha-Lores, who is an expert on international water law, and I believe maybe just finished completing her PhD in the subject with this published paper. I hope, if that's so, congrats. And she'll be presenting on, looking at source to sea from a new and again perhaps even more complicated perspective of dealing with it in international seas and international river laws. So by looking at an international water law perspective and how we could address, promote sort of source to sea management and solutions within transboundary contexts. So Flavia, please welcome. You're welcome to present.
Thank you, Josh. And let me just start by thanking IWRA. It's an honor to be here because being part of Water International, first time I'm published there, and also a great pleasure because participating in this webinar, I'm seeing a lot of friendly faces from my water family. So a shout to Fuad, Christina, Laura, Renee, Yumiko, and Jim. Very nice to be with you. And of course, my fellow speakers today that I've known for many years. With that, so the paper is apparently the longest in the special edition. So it was very hard for me to think of ways to prepare this presentation in 10 minutes. I decided to focus on the aspect of the paper that to me was the most important. So just with a few clarification of concepts, the paper builds on two key concepts of international water law: community of interests and the drainage basin approach. Community of interests is a theoretical framework that governs and guides the application, interpretation, implementation, codification, and progressive development of rules of international law applicable to the use, protection, and management of transboundary basins and their ecosystems, which in some cases may reach as far as the marine and coastal environments. In essence, community of interest envisions close cooperation, also referred to as joint cooperation, among all riparian states across the basin, within the framework of agreements and institutions that are specifically designed to advance common interests. Community of interest is rooted in the hydrological unity of a river basin or a lake basin or an aquifer as the starting point for framing transboundary water cooperation. This unity, the idea is that this unity interconnects all basin states, and from this physical interconnection develops common interests of other nature, culture, economic, social, and so forth. So the idea is that this common interest can only be advanced through a specific type of cooperation, joint cooperation, be it joint management plans, shared data systems, or common regulations and guidelines. So that's the core of community of interest. The drainage basin approach, it basically refers to that component of integrated water resources management with which we are all very familiar, but that component of the IWRM that places the basin at the center as the primary biogeographical unit for planning. And because the basin is at the heart of the doctrine of community of interests, the drainage basin approach, I view it as determining the primary scope of application of community of interests. And here's the main finding. So with these two concepts clarified, here's the main finding to me of the paper, that agreements and institutions inspired by community of interests are better positioned to integrate source to sea considerations into transboundary water cooperation into the process. So just a few examples. At the basin level, you have the Senegal Basin Charter. In Article 16, it calls on countries, requires countries to protect and preserve the ecosystem of international watercourses, including the marine environment. At the global level, the UN Watercourses Convention contains similar language, only specifying that countries ought to do so individually or where appropriate through joint cooperation. They're bringing in the community of interest element as well. And finally, the other global convention, the CE one, develops this idea even further. So from its preamble, it links to sustainable management of transboundary waters to the challenge of land-based marine pollution. It requires states to cooperate on the protection of the environment, again, including the marine environment. And something very interesting about the convention, if you're in a scenario of a coastal state being impacted by activities going on in a transboundary basin, of which it is not a riparian, under the CE Water Convention, if all riparian countries agree, they may invite that coastal state to participate in their activities. Similarly, their joint body may engage with the joint body created for the sea, that particular sea that is being impacted, to also participate in that activities, the body that exists among the coastal states, to harmonize their work and to prevent transboundary impact. So as a short case study, and very briefly, because we've had a lot of those before, but I'd like to refer back to the case of the Danube, because the EC has informed the drafting and implementation of many transboundary basin agreements in Europe and Centralia. And the Danube Black Sea system is a great example, because you see that there applying source to sea has actually led to concrete improvements in the basin. But the point that I would like to make here is that that case study shows that it's politically and economically feasible to implement community of interest in the basin. And you also see the drainage basin approach and the source to sea concept at work together effectively to lead to changes on the ground. And just to coming to a conclusion, what's unique about the agreements that are inspired by community of interest, because I said that those are the ones that remain incorporate source to systems. And here, quoting from Brigitte, I think she's listening here today from SIRI, she's an expert on S2S, and she says that from her experience, 2 lessons are important: to consider the whole system, which is exactly what community of interest calls for, and that cooperation needs to be sustained because this takes years. And so also community of interest has this, instead of going ad hoc, really going for the long run for cooperation, this is stability. So just to illustrate why cooperation framed by community of interest is important in this context of source to sea. So to conclude, in many places, we still have cooperation mainly framed by limited territorial sovereignty. So what community of interest does, it builds on that, but it transcends to frame cooperation around the pursuit of common interests, where unilateral interests take a secondary seat. Still important, still considered, but this cooperation is mainly centered on common interests. And so community of interest offers a good entry point for source to sea considerations to penetrate international water law by prolonging the drainage basin approach where appropriate to account for freshwater, coastal, and marine interlinkages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Flavia. And I think that that final point you made is a really important insight. And I also recommend everyone to read the full paper, which goes into some depth in the question, but making this link between community of interest, the drainage basin approach, and source to sea would give a better entry point into integrating source to sea approaches into transboundary discourse. So I think that's a very important insight, and I encourage you to read everyone to read the paper. Now we have only 5 minutes left of this session. I appreciate that several of you have left reflections in the chat and also have pose some questions to the moderators, to the speakers and panelists, excuse me. What I'll do now is I'd like to give each speaker a very quick opportunity for final reflection, and also during that time to address any questions that have been raised in the Q&A chat for live answers. I will begin with Ivan. Ivan, it'd be great to hear your thoughts from the day, and also if you could help to answer the question posed to you in the chat, which I think is related to. Hold on, sorry, I've lost it for a question.
Okay, I have the question.
Yes. Sorry.
Josh, shall I speak now? Okay, thank you. Yes, time is limited. There was a question, what other factors led to the nutrient pollution reduction in Danube Basin on the top of dramatic reduction of the dumping untreated or badly treated wastewater from municipal sectors. This was a big problem in the past. It's still pertaining in some part of the basin, but this is more or less very not easy, but this is the business where we know where to go, and most of it has been done. The other factors, equally, I would say, equally relevant for the nutrient reduction was that our basin undergo in 19th a dramatic political economic transformation. The half of the lower part of the basin moved from the former communist bloc under the oppression of Soviet Union to a new democratic parliamentary politics, market economy, let's say, system, which led to also some bad consequences for collapse of industries. Many of industries collapsed. Secondly, many large agriculture farms collapsed. So that means that, in particular, the phosphorus was the reduction of phosphorus came from this one, and also the large agriculture units in these former socialist countries were dismissed. The soil was, the land was given back to the former owners, and they have no money for this excess use of nutrient fertilizers. So this also contributed largely to this. And secondly, it was also the new policies and laws from the European Union, because now 9 of the countries are the members of the European Union, 5 others are on its way. So in their way to harmonizing their national water management policies and regulations, they have to look also at the nutrient pollution. So this was a complex of the economic collapse, new policies, and plus heavy work on many municipalities and governments to reduce the pollution. What, if I may add one sentence, what is my, let's say, take-home message from this webinar, except of really enjoying the variety of different approaches and scientific results, I would say the challenge is still in the communication between marine reserves or coastal areas managers and the river basin managers. There is still quite a little dialogue, and really the cooperative mechanisms are not very much developed all over the world, but there is no other way how to really save the coasts from the erosion because of the sediments, against the pollution, hypoxia, and so on and so forth. So this is really the key. But I very much appreciate the scientific approach on this pharmaceuticals and hazardous chemicals, because this is the future of our work also in Danube. This is the biggest challenge we have to better understand what type of hazardous substances we are delivering to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Scott, we are at time now. There is a remaining question for Rebecca about the role of RBOs, and questions for Ruth about the role of groundwater within source to sea management. what do you advise?
Well, I think Rebecca, you had mentioned that you needed to, you had a call quickly at the end of this session. Do you think you can quickly respond to this question there regarding effective multi-stakeholder platform or business organizations?
Sure. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, sure. Just quickly. Thank you, Eric. I was just reading your message. Actually, it links to what Ivan was just talking about in terms of, fundamentally linking the sort of freshwater and marine communities. It is about, Eric's question is about, what's effective and what is often an effective type of multi-stakeholder platform. Well, it is about including the diversity of stakeholders that you have along the continuum. So fundamental to a multi-stakeholder platform, dealing with source to sea issues is the inclusion of, the freshwater management sort of community of practice, if you like, and marine and coastal and estuary communities of practice, and getting them in the same room exchanging. And because they're informal networks, they provide an opportunity for social learning, for making connections. And sometimes it's just linking certain colleagues together, having certain conversations that can catalyze and move these things forward. We learn from each other. That's how we move forward, and we learn from our colleagues, and we learn from each other. So it's a really good opportunity to link people and harness that. I would just like to say it was really interesting listening to all the presentations today, and thank you very much to the rest of the panelists. It's great to have the range of detail from the case studies, but also to have Flavia's reflections as well from another governance perspective. And I just wanted to say thank you very much again for inviting us to present. And we look forward to further discussions. And please don't hesitate to all the participants out there to get in touch, to continue the conversation. It's the strength of all of us together to find these solutions and to continue to collaborate and create this dialogue on source to sea that helps things move forward. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Now, I think there's one question in here for Dr. Ruth. Can you,
Yeah.
Ruth, are you there?
Yeah, Ruth, there's a question, I think, about the role of groundwater in the source to sea management.
Yeah, it definitely plays a very important role, and one that in certain source to sea systems would be really critical to address and include. I'm right now thinking of any example where source to sea approaches included a groundwater perspective. I not know about it if it does exist, but just to confirm that including the groundwater is very important.
Excellent. I think, Flavia, is there one question that was maybe addressed to you here regarding the Grand Ethiopian, who had this question, intake of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam with regards to the countries involved, Ethiopia, Sudan, Egypt. Flavia, is that more kind of in your wheelhouse, or did anyone else want to respond to that? A charged question, like a little political here, but can't hear you, Flavia. I think you're muted there.
Got it. No, I just wanted to, because you asked us for final reflection, so to do that and follow up on the question of groundwater, and that's something that I address on the paper as well. So the first challenge we have is that many of the transboundary basin agreements are focused on surface waters. So a first step for us international water lawyers would be to ensure that at least groundwater is captured somehow in those agreements by amendments or protocols or whatever means we can. So we're not even there with groundwater yet. Source to sea considerations would be a step even further. And in the scenario, in the context of international law, you actually have a branch of law that goes for oceans and seas, and separate branch for freshwater. So we need to integrate, and that's also reflected in policy discussions in the Agenda 2030. We always talk about the SDGs, how integrated they are, and they really are. But even in such a highly developed agenda, forward-looking, you have one SDG for ocean, one SDG for freshwater, and you have some points where they meet, like in the case of wastewater treatment to deal with pollution, but you really don't have an SDG or a target that really deals directly and head-on with the freshwater ocean linkages. So I think within my field of study, which is law, we lawyers and states and practitioners, we still have a long way to go to include groundwater and then coastal and marine linkages. And then somebody talked about the hydrological cycle. I absolutely agree. But atmospheric water, so when you really think about the whole cycle, that's not even there in the discussion. So to think about countries cooperating really along the whole hydrological cycle, that's something completely out of the state of things right now. The Senegal Basin Charter that I referred is the only one I could find that places the basin within this larger context and requires states to consider not just the basin as a whole, which is in line with community of interest, but really the hydrological cycle, so that cooperation goes beyond the blue water per se. So just to conclude, yeah, we still have a long way to go to really integrate all the different types of waters, and source to seas is one of those challenges, but I think that definitely one that deserves more attention from our community. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. And with that, we are a bit over time. I'd like to thank all of our panelists and participants for joining us for a very interesting discussion today. Yes, and I leave you the final word to close our event today.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Josh. And I'd really like to thank the panel and Josh, our moderator. So a big thank you to Josh Weinberg, program manager at the Water Resources Department of the Stockholm National Water Institute. Also from our panelists, Sarantuya Zandraya, program specialist at the Division of Water Sciences Intergovernmental Hydrology Program, Ivan Zavensky, Executive Secretary, International Commission on the Protection of the Danube River, Ruth Matthews, Senior Manager, Stockholm National Water Institute, Rebecca Welling, Natural Infrastructure Advisor at the ICUN Global Water Program, and Flavia Lores, leading lawyer at the International and Comparative Law Milers Avagondos Environmental Consultancy in Brazil. Thank you, everybody, for taking time to come and join us and make your contributions today. Really appreciate that. So just to remind everybody in the audience that some of the panel, and I know that IWRA ourselves, are all on Twitter. So go ahead and look them up, give them a follow if you're interested. Also, if the presentations left you interested in learning more, please go ahead and check out our LinkedIn webpage and continue discussion there. So please make sure you use your social media and follow us and engage the conversation there. I really hope that everybody in the audience gained some insights from this panel. And it gave me a lot of material to think about in the coming days, and I hope this is generating creativity for your own work as well. If you need to go back and to look at it again, we'll have this website, we'll have the recording, the webinar, in addition to the PDFs of the presentations on our website at www.iwra.org. In addition, to remind you that all these presentations come from the special issue of Water International. So if you go to our website there at www.iwra.org, you'll be able to link through and find our journal, Water International. It's our flagship journal, and it's quite well regarded, and it's really quite an honor to be able to work with the editors and everyone connected there. So go ahead and look up the full text of the articles there, and if you're the type who publish our articles, go ahead and feel free to send a submission to us, and maybe we can get you published as well. We'd like that. So Just to remind you, everyone here in the audience, that the webinar is brought to you by the International Water Resources Association. We are a 50-year-old nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization. We highlight our emerging disciplines and geographies in connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. As you might have caught, this is our 50th year of existence, our 50th birthday, and we have a number of special events planned to celebrate. So be on the lookout here throughout 2021 to see some of the special events. Some high-level panels. We'll have some other great things going on. So please follow along and join us in our celebration. So if you're interested in learning more about the association, or if you'd like to become a member or to watch the recordings of these webinars, please go to www.iwra.org. So on behalf of the whole IWRA office, we really appreciate you tuning in today, and thank you for viewing our. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.